They didn't value you until you vanished. They mistook your presence for permanence. They assumed you'd always be there because you always were. But one day, something inside you clicked, not in anger, not out of revenge, but in truth. You realized that giving so much of yourself to someone who didn't truly see you wasn't love. It was self-neglect, so you stepped back, not to punish them, not to play games, but to protect your energy, to honor your own worth. You vanished from the places where your presence was taken for granted, and suddenly they noticed. Funny, isn't it, how silence screams louder than any argument, how absence echoes louder than constant presence. Now, they miss the version of you they never truly appreciated. But here's the truth. If it took your absence for them to see your value, they were never really ready to hold it. You're not hard to love. You were just loving in the wrong direction. From now on, you don't need to prove your worth by staying. Let people earn the privilege of your presence, because when someone truly sees you, really sees you, they won't risk losing you to figure it out. People often mistake someone's consistency for a guarantee that they'll never leave. When you show up again and again, supporting, caring, loving, it creates a rhythm. That rhythm becomes expected, and over time, people start to believe that no matter what they do, you'll always be there. Not because they're cruel, necessarily, but because they've grown used to the security your presence brings. You become the emotional safety net they never think will snap, but just because someone is consistent doesn't mean they're infinite. You showed up even when it was inconvenient. You answered the calls, even when they never asked how you were doing. You gave your energy, your attention, your time, again and again, not for reward, but because it's who you are. And that's a beautiful thing, but when you give consistently and it isn't acknowledged or appreciated, your consistency becomes your invisibility. You weren't valued because you didn't require attention to stay, and so they stopped offering it. This is the dangerous side of being low maintenance or emotionally generous. People start to believe you don't need much. They assume you don't feel neglected because you're not demanding. But here's the truth. The strongest people, those who show up quietly and consistently, often feel the most deeply. And when they're ignored or taken for granted, it doesn't hurt less. It just hurts more quietly. The problem is, when you're always there, people stop asking why you're there. They stop seeing it as a choice. But every time you show up, it is a choice. You are choosing to invest your time, energy, and heart. And when someone begins to treat your presence like a given instead of a gift, something has to change. Consistency is not weakness. It's not an invitation to be taken for granted. It's a strength. But strength doesn't mean staying in places where your value isn't seen. In fact, true strength is knowing when to stop being consistent with the wrong people. It's recognizing that loyalty doesn't mean staying loyal to people who are disloyal to your growth. So often, people only realize what they had once it's gone. That friend who was always checking in stops texting. That partner who was always forgiving finally walks away. That person who always made time suddenly stops making you a priority. And only then do people ask what happened. What happened is simple. You treated consistency like commitment, and they treated it like convenience. But you're not a convenience. You're not just a reliable option in someone else's unpredictable life. You are a person with limits, with needs, with value. Your consistency is not a guarantee, it's a privilege. And once that privilege is ignored long enough, it disappears. Let them wonder where you went. Let them feel the gap your presence used to fill. Because one of the most powerful things you can do is stop showing up for people who never asked why you kept showing up in the first place. There comes a point when staying becomes more painful than leaving, when giving becomes draining, not fulfilling. When you begin to realize that your presence in someone's life has stopped being appreciated and started being expected. That's when you have a choice to make, not out of anger, not to play games, but out of self-respect. Pulling back, walking away, going silent, these aren't acts of punishment, they're acts of self-protection. When someone doesn't value you, staying becomes a way of hurting yourself. It's easy to feel guilty for stepping away, especially when you've been the giver in the relationship. You tell yourself that maybe they're just going through something. Maybe they didn't mean to make you feel unseen. You rationalize their inconsistency, you excuse their emotional unavailability, but deep down you feel the sting. You feel what it's like to always be the one reaching out, initiating, holding it all together while they meet you with half effort or indifference. That slow erosion of your self-worth isn't something you can ignore forever, so you stop. You pull back, not because you want to hurt them, but because you finally recognize the toll it's taking on you. You realize that love shouldn't cost you your dignity, that you don't need to keep showing up for someone who barely shows up for you. And for the first time, maybe in a long time, you make the choice to honor your boundaries, to say, this isn't healthy for me anymore. Of course, they might be confused. They might accuse you of changing, of walking away too suddenly, but that's only because they never noticed the quiet ways you were slipping away long before you physically left. They didn't see the internal battle you fought between staying and leaving. They didn't hear the late night thoughts that whispered, you deserve better. So, when you finally do protect yourself, they interpret it as punishment because they've mistaken your silence for strategy. But this isn't a strategy, this is survival. Choosing to walk away from someone who doesn't value you is not an act of cruelty. It's an act of clarity. It's seeing that continuing to give to someone who only takes isn't love. It's self-abandonment. And protecting your energy isn't selfish. In fact, it's the most honest, courageous thing you can do for yourself. It sends a message, not to them, but to you, that your peace matters, that your emotional health is more important than maintaining a connection built on imbalance. And it's not about holding grudges. It's not about cutting someone off to teach them a lesson. It's simply about choosing not to stay where your soul is being slowly chipped away. It's about drawing a line where your worth was blurred. When someone truly values you, you won't have to disappear for them to realize it. But if they can only appreciate your presence once it's gone, then they were never truly ready for what you had to offer in the first place. Sometimes it takes your absence for someone to finally notice your presence. As painful as it is, that's often when people begin to reflect after you're no longer around. When your messages stop coming, when your support disappears, when your name no longer lights up their screen, they're left sitting with the quiet you left behind. And suddenly, the very things they overlooked start to feel like missing pieces. People often don't realize how much space you occupied in their life until that space goes empty. The small check-ins, the way you remembered the details, how you made them feel safe, understood, wanted. Those things blend into the background when they're taken for granted. But remove them, and it's like the air shifts. That absence becomes loud. It fills rooms with echoes of everything they didn't appreciate when they had it. What's ironic is that you probably gave them plenty of chances to see you clearly while you were still present. You didn't just leave the moment things got hard. You stayed through the silence. You stayed through the emotional distance. You stayed while convincing yourself that maybe, just maybe, they would realize what they had, but they didn't. Not then, because some people only start paying attention when the things they counted on are suddenly no longer there. Your absence forces reflection in a way your presence never could. It doesn't mean they never cared. It doesn't mean they're bad people, but it does mean they failed to value you in real time. They didn't put in the effort when it counted. And now they're left wishing they had done things differently, wishing they had asked more questions, listened more carefully, held you a little tighter. But by the time someone is finally ready to give you what you needed, you may no longer want it, because realizing your worth in hindsight Sight isn't the same as loving you in the moment. Appreciation that only comes after loss isn't genuine connection. It's regret. And regret has never built a healthy relationship. That's the power of stepping back. It brings clarity, not just to them but to you. You see who notices your absence, who reaches out, who takes accountability. And equally, you see who stays silent, who lets the distance grow, who was never really invested to begin with. Absence doesn't just expose what you meant to others. It reveals what they truly meant to you too. You're not meant to be a reminder of what people should have done better. You're meant to be loved fully while you're there, not just missed when you're gone. And if someone needs to lose you to understand your value, then they were never truly ready to hold it. The right people don't need your silence to start listening. They don't need your distance to start caring. They see your worth in the everyday moments. They honor it not out of fear of losing you, but because they want to keep you. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't make you chase. It doesn't require you to constantly prove that you're enough. If you find yourself constantly over-explaining your worth, working overtime to earn affection, or settling for crumbs in the hope of one day being fully seen, then what you're in isn't love. It's emotional survival, and it's exhausting. Too many people stay in relationships or connections where their effort is disproportionate. You're always the one initiating, always the one compromising, always the one trying to be enough. You lower your standards because you don't want to seem demanding. You silence your needs because you don't want to push them away. You become a quieter version of yourself in the hope that they'll finally choose you, love you, prioritize you. But love that only exists when you're silent about your needs isn't love at all. It's performance. You were not made to dim your light to make someone else comfortable. The right person doesn't feel threatened by your emotions, your standards, or your voice. They embrace it. Real connection thrives on mutual energy, not one-sided effort. But somewhere along the way, you might have confused being easy to love with being easy to keep around. And those two things are not the same. Being easy to love means being genuine, compassionate, kind. Being easy to keep means asking for nothing, tolerating too much, and pretending you're okay when you're not. There's a subtle pressure many people feel to not ask for too much, so you become low maintenance. You accept delays in replies, emotional unavailability, half-hearted effort, all because you're afraid of being left behind. You think, if I just hold on a little longer, they'll come around. But love should never feel like a test you have to pass. It should feel safe, consistent, grounded. When you have to chase someone just to feel chosen, you lose pieces of yourself in the process. You forget how to be still. You start performing instead of connecting. You become anxious every time there's silence. You feel like love is something you have to earn rather than something that's freely given. That's not love, that's insecurity being dressed up as romance. The truth is, you shouldn't have to prove your worth to someone who truly sees you. You shouldn't have to chase someone who wants to stay. The right person won't make you feel like you're asking for too much just because you want clarity, consistency, or care. They'll meet you there not because you begged them to, but because it's how they love. When you stop chasing, when you stop shrinking, something shifts. You start attracting people who want to meet you where you already are, not people you have to drag forward or wait endlessly for. You begin to reclaim your power, your peace, your identity. You stop accepting almost and start holding out for absolutely, because real love doesn't ask you to abandon yourself. It calls you home. Your presence is not a given. It's not something people are entitled to just because they've known you for a long time or shared moments with you in the past. Your time, your energy, your emotional availability, all of these are gifts, and gifts should be earned, not expected. Too often, people fall into the trap of making themselves endlessly available to those who don't value them. You show up again and again, hoping that your loyalty will be enough for someone to finally see you. But what you're really doing is teaching them that they don't have to do anything to keep you. That's not love. That's emotional convenience. When someone assumes that you'll always be there, no matter how little they give, they stop trying. It's not always intentional. Sometimes it's subtle. They get used to your kindness, your check-ins, your willingness to forgive. They grow complacent, but what they're really doing is revealing that they never believed your presence had conditions, that they didn't think you'd ever leave. That's where the problem begins. You can be the most supportive, loving, understanding person in the world. But if someone thinks they don't have to show up for you in return, they'll stop trying. They'll think your care is infinite, your patience unbreakable, and eventually they'll stop seeing you as someone who deserves effort. They'll see you as someone who tolerates the lack of it. That's why it's important to set a standard, not a harsh demand, but a quiet, powerful message that says, I won't stay where I'm not valued. You shouldn't have to convince someone to appreciate you. You shouldn't have to remind them to care. The right people won't need a wake-up call. They'll recognize your value in real time, not in your absence. They'll be aware of what you bring to their life and they'll act accordingly consistently, not just when they feel you slipping away. Earning your presence means showing up for you emotionally, mentally, and practically. It means being present, not just physically, but with attention, effort, and care. It means listening, asking questions, investing in the relationship, whether romantic or otherwise. And it also means being willing to grow, because connection requires more than comfort. It requires effort. You are not a placeholder. You are not someone people should rely on only when it's convenient or when they're lonely. You are a full human being with needs, depth, and value. And the moment you begin to see your presence as something precious is the moment you stop giving it so freely to those who only notice it when it's threatened. The reality is, if you have to constantly prove why you're worthy of someone's attention, you're giving your energy to the wrong person. Your space, your loyalty, your heart, those things matter. Don't give them to people who think they can keep them just by doing the bare minimum. Let your presence be something people feel grateful for, not something they assume will always be available, no matter how they treat you. Thank you.